Long before the story narrows to one man, one family, and one ark, the Bible opens with a world that does not feel ruined yet. It is ordered, named, blessed, and called good. Light is divided from darkness. Waters are separated. Dry land appears. Living things are told to multiply according to their kinds. Human beings are made in the image of God and given a place within creation that is both royal and dependent. They are not owners in the modern sense. They are stewards within a world that belongs to another. The early chapters of Genesis speak in the language of origins, but they also speak in the language of memory. The text does not read like a modern scientific report, and it does not try to. It gives the listener a world seen through covenant eyes. In that world, the first human beings are placed in a garden planted by God Himself. Eden is not described as a myth floating nowhere. It is given rivers, land, trees, and direction. One river flows out of Eden and divides into four. Two names are familiar, the Tigris and the Euphrates. The other two, Pishon and Gihon, are far less certain. Their mention has invited centuries of reflection because the text seems to point at geography and mystery at the same time. Eden is near enough to imagine, yet distant enough to remain beyond recovery. Later readers often tried to fill in the physical conditions of this first world. Some imagined a stable climate unlike the one now known, a softer earth, a better sky, a stronger vitality in plant, animal, and human life. The Bible itself is more restrained. Genesis says that before rain had fallen on the land, moisture rose from the earth and watered the ground. That one detail has been expanded in many directions, but the text keeps its focus elsewhere. Its concern is not to map the atmosphere. Its concern is to show a creation receiving life as gift, not wrung out by struggle. In Eden, abundance and boundary exist together. The garden is rich with trees pleasant to the sight and good for food. Yet in the center stand two trees that define the moral shape of human existence: the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One represents life held in fellowship with God. The other marks a limit. Human beings may receive the world, name the animals, cultivate the garden, and live in blessing, but they are not invited to seize moral autonomy, as if wisdom were something taken by force. The prohibition is not arbitrary. It teaches that freedom within creation is never freedom from the Creator. This matters because the biblical story of the flood begins, in a quiet way, here. The flood is not first a tale about weather, judgment, or survival. It is the last great movement in a long unraveling that starts when human beings step across a boundary they were meant to honor. The world of Noah is not merely unlucky or primitive. It is the result of a moral fracture moving outward through generations. The portrait of the first humans also has an intimacy that later ages would rarely know. Adam and Eve are not introduced through temple ritual, priestly mediation, or distant revelation. The text speaks of God planting, speaking, commanding, bringing animals, and seeking the human pair after their disobedience. The language is simple, but the effect is profound. In the beginning, the human story is not centered on how to climb up to heaven. It begins with heaven drawing near. This is one reason why ancient readers, Jewish and Christian alike, often saw Eden as more than a garden. They saw it as the first sanctuary, the place where God and humanity met without barrier. Later temple imagery seems to echo this memory. Precious stones, carved cherubim, eastward entrance, river imagery, and sacred presence all suggest that the loss of Eden was not only the loss of innocence, it was the loss of nearness. Outside the Bible, many ancient cultures also remembered a first age that was larger, brighter, and somehow closer to the divine than the world that followed. Mesopotamian king lists speak of rulers with impossibly long reigns before a great flood. Greek poets imagined a golden age. Traditions from many lands preserve memories of an older world, sometimes peaceful, sometimes terrible, often destroyed by water. These parallels do not erase the uniqueness of Genesis, but they do remind us that the flood story belongs to a very old conversation in human memory. people across civilizations looked backward and sensed rupture. The world as we know it felt diminished, and the deep past felt charged with loss. Genesis shares that sense of distance, but it gives the distance a moral center. The first world was not lost because time passed. It was lost because trust broke. The garden was not abandoned through accident. It was forfeited. If Eden stands at the headwaters of the story, then the flood stands much later as the moment when the whole human landscape shows how far it has drifted from that beginning. The waters of judgment do not fall upon a morally neutral earth. They fall upon a world already east of Eden, already marked by exile, toil, desire, shame, and death. To understand Noah, one has to begin in that first enclosed place, where life was offered freely, and where a single command revealed that love without obedience cannot remain whole. Chapter 2. The break in the human story comes not through war or famine, but through a conversation. A serpent enters the narrative and does what destructive voices often do. It does not begin with open denial. It begins by bending the command, making it sound harsher than it was, then recasting disobedience as maturity. You will not surely die. Your eyes will be opened. You will be like God. In Genesis, sin first appears as a crisis of trust before it appears as a visible act. The fruit is taken by hands, but the deeper act has already happened in the heart. God is no longer received as giver and guide. He is treated as a rival. The command is no longer seen as protection. It is treated as restriction. The human pair does not merely want knowledge. They want knowledge detached from dependence, wisdom detached from reverence. The moment they eat, what opens is not godlike freedom but self-consciousness. They know they are naked and they hide. This is one of the quietest and most devastating turns in Scripture. The first result of rebellion is not power, it is exposure. The world remains there. The trees are still rooted. The garden is still beautiful. But the people within it can no longer stand in that beauty without fear. When God speaks judgment, each part of creation touched by rebellion bears consequence. The serpent is cursed. The woman will know pain and strain within the bond meant for life. The man will meet resistance from the ground he was meant to tend. Thorns and thistles appear as symbols of a creation now at odds with human labor. Work is not introduced as punishment. Work existed before the fall, but now work becomes burdened. The soil no longer yields without struggle. The relationship between human beings and the earth is no longer harmonious stewardship. It becomes toil under mortality. Dust becomes the final word over the body. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. The sentence is plain. Death enters the horizon of human existence, not as a natural conclusion to a fulfilled life in the biblical imagination, but as a sign that fellowship has been broken. Humanity was formed from the earth, yet meant for breath from God. Once cut off from the source of life, the body returns to what it was taken from. And still, judgment is not the whole story. Even in the midst of it, there are signs of mercy. God clothes the man and the woman. The text does not dwell on the act, yet it lingers in memory. Before they leave the garden, they are covered by the one they have distrusted. The promise that the seed of the woman will bruise the serpent also stands like a faint light at the edge of ruin. It is not yet explained, it is simply spoken. But from that point on, the biblical story moves with an expectation that evil will not reign unchallenged forever. The expulsion from Eden is described with solemn clarity. Human beings are driven out, and cherubim are placed at the east of the garden, with a flaming sword turning every way to guard the path to the tree of life. The image is severe, but it is also protective. In the logic of Genesis, eternal life in a broken condition would not be blessing. Access to the tree is barred because the human story must now pass through exile, history, and redemption before life can be restored. Ancient and later readers often wondered whether Eden still existed somewhere, hidden or inaccessible, a real place now closed by divine decree. The text does not say. What it does preserve is the ache of visibility without return. Humanity leaves a place that was not imaginary to them. They walk eastward away from presence, and the direction matters. East becomes the direction of exile in Genesis. Cain goes east. Later builders of Babel gather in the east. The movement away from God often follows that line. This expulsion shapes the flood story in ways that are easy to miss. The deluge is not the first removal from sacred order. It is a greater echo of the first one. In Eden, one pair is driven from a holy place. In Noah's day, an entire violent world is washed from the face of the ground. In both cases, the issue is not mere rule-breaking in the abstract. It is the collapse of a proper human place before God. The loss of Eden also changes how human memory works. Every generation afterward lives under a shadow cast by something it did not see but inherited. The garden remains behind them as a lost standard. People still marry, bear children, build, plant, sing, shape metal, and bury their dead. Civilization continues. Yet, beneath every achievement, there remains the knowledge that the human race is no longer at home in the world in the same way. That tension gives the early chapters of Genesis their unusual tone. They are not naive about human possibility, and they are not cynical either. They know that people can make music and cities. They know that people can pray. They also know that a hand made to tend the garden can be lifted against a brother. Once the boundary in Eden has been crossed, every later boundary becomes more fragile. The flood will arrive only after those fractures have widened through generations, until the violence of the heart has become the atmosphere of the age. Chapter 3. The first brothers bring offerings, and the story narrows again to something painfully intimate. After Eden, one might expect the next crisis to involve kings or nations. Instead, it unfolds in a field between two sons. Cain, the worker of the ground, brings an offering from its produce. Abel, the keeper of sheep, brings the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. The Lord regards Abel and his offering, but not Cain and his. The text does not explain every detail of why one is accepted and the other is not, and later interpreters have filled the silence in different ways. Some point to the quality of Abel's gift, which is described with greater care. Some emphasize the disposition of the giver, a line supported by later biblical reflection. What matters in the narrative is Cain's response. He is angry, and his face falls. Sin is then described not as an abstract principle, but as a crouching thing at the door desiring him. He must rule over it. This is one of the first great moral moments after Eden. Cain is warned before he acts. He is not trapped. He is not ignorant. The struggle is set before him in direct terms, yet the field becomes the place of murder. Abel is killed by his own brother, and the ground that had already been cursed now receives blood. In Genesis, violence is never treated as isolated. It enters the soil, the family, and the memory of the earth itself. The divine question that follows, "Where is Abel your brother?" exposes how quickly sin hardens into evasion. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The line has echoed through centuries because it expresses a refusal that lies beneath much human cruelty. Cain rejects not only guilt but responsibility. He will not hold his brother's life as a claim upon his own. Cain is cursed from the ground, marked, and sent away. Yet even here the story refuses simplicity. He is judged, but he is also protected from immediate revenge. The mark of Cain has been discussed endlessly, often badly. The text does not describe it, and it does not authorize later fantasies. Its function in the story is clear enough. The murderer is not permitted to become the first casualty in a chain of blood feud. God retains judgment in his own hands. Cain goes away from the presence of the Lord and settles in the land of Nod, east of Eden. There, remarkably, he builds a city and names it after his son Enoch. Civilization emerges in exile. This is one of Genesis' most subtle observations. Human culture develops not in a spotless realm, but in a world already marked by alienation. The descendants of Cain become associated with livestock, music, and metalwork. Jabal is remembered as the father of those who dwell in tents and raise herds. Jubal is linked to the lyre and pipe, Tubal Cain is associated with the forging of tools from bronze and iron. The Bible does not condemn these developments in themselves. Music is not evil. Craft is not evil. Settlement is not evil. The problem is that technical growth and moral depth do not advance together. A line capable of art and industry is also capable of glorifying violence. The brief speech of Lamech makes this plain. He boasts before his wives that he has killed a man for wounding him, a young man for striking him. He takes the protective words spoken over Cain and twists it into a banner for escalating vengeance. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, then Lamech 77-fold in a few verses. Genesis sketches a pattern that later history knows well. Human beings can shape instruments, domesticate animals, organize urban life, and still become more dangerous, not less. Culture can refine ability without healing the heart. The city becomes a place of gathering, memory, and production, but it can also become a monument to insecurity, ambition, and force. Many readers have noticed that the Bible's first city is founded by a man under judgment. That does not mean every city thereafter is cursed by definition. Jerusalem itself will later stand at the center of biblical hope. But this first city carries an ambivalence that matters. It represents human durability after exile. It also represents the tendency to seek permanence apart from reconciliation with God. Build, name, establish, secure. The impulses are recognizable. They are not trivial. They come from fear as much as from creativity. Against this line, the narrative places another beginning. Adam knows his wife again, and she bears Seth. His name is linked to appointment, as if this child stands as a granted continuation after the loss of Abel. In Seth's days, the text says, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. That short line opens another current in the story. Not all memory of God has vanished. Not every family bows before violence. There remains a line of worship, however fragile. The world before the flood, then, is not portrayed as uniformly dark from the first moment. It is divided, entangled, and moving. One stream develops visible power, tools, music, and cities. Another preserves invocation, memory, and hope. Yet the tragedy of Genesis is that separation cannot hold forever. The violence in Cain's house does not remain there. The exile from Eden is already spreading through human society. By the time Noah appears, the field where one brother killed another will have widened into a world where violence has become ordinary air. Chapter 4, Genesis 5 often feels, to modern ears, like a pause in the story. Name follows name. Age follows age. Fathers beget sons and daughters, live on and die. Yet this chapter is more than genealogy. It asks the listener to imagine a world in which the earliest generations endure for centuries, overlapping each other in astonishing ways. An of 930 years. Seth, 912. Enosh, 905. Kenan, 910. Jared. Methuselah, 969. Lamech, 77. These numbers have been read in different ways. Some take them as direct historical ages. Others see stylized features, especially given ancient Near Eastern traditions where early rulers also possess massive spans of life. Whatever one's judgment, the function of the chapter is clear. It places the world before the flood at a vast remove from ordinary human experience and presents longevity as part of a diminishing pattern. These are not people living at the pace known now. History accumulates slowly, heavily, almost geologically. This matters because long life changes memory. In a world such as Genesis describes, oral tradition is not fragile in the same way. Few generations separate Adam from Noah. Stories do not have to pass through dozens of lifetimes to be heard again. The first acts of humanity, the garden, the expulsion, the murder of Abel, all remain near enough to personal memory or family witness to shape entire generations. The weight of the beginning is not lost in antiquity. It presses continuously upon the living, and yet each entry ends the same way. He died. The repetition works like a tolling bell. Even in an age of extraordinary years, the sentence spoken in Eden has not failed. Death does not vanish because life is prolonged, it waits. The long chronology is not a denial of mortality. It is mortality stretched across centuries. In the midst of that rhythm, one figure breaks the pattern. Enoch lives 65 years and fathers Methuselah, then walks with God 300 years more. The phrase is simple and rare. Others live, Enoch walks. Then the chapter says he was not, for God took him. No death formula follows. Later generations would ponder this with awe. Was he translated into heaven? Was he spared death altogether? The text leaves much unsaid, but its effect is unmistakable. In a lineage otherwise marked by the refrain of death, one man's communion with God interrupts the cadence. Enoch became a figure of great importance in later Jewish literature. Books associated with his name, especially 1 Enoch, expand his role dramatically, placing him in visions of judgment, angelic rebellion, and cosmic secrets. These writings are not part of the Hebrew Bible, but they shaped the imagination of Second Temple Judaism and help explain how many ancient readers understood difficult passages in Genesis. When the story of the sons of God and the Nephilim appears in the next chapter, Enoch's later legacy already stands nearby as a witness to how seriously that period was remembered. Methuselah, Enoch's son, also gathered a symbolic weight in later tradition. His name has been connected, perhaps uncertainly, to ideas of death and sending forth. What can be said with more confidence is that later chronologies often noticed that if one follows the Masoretic numbers of Genesis, Methuselah dies in the year of the flood. The text itself does not turn that into overt prophecy, but the coincidence invited reflection. It allowed later readers to see his immense lifespan not only as marvel, but as delay. Judgment did not rush. It waited through generations. Lamech, Noah's father, speaks over his son in words full of strain. Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. The naming of Noah is linked to rest and comfort. Before the ark is ever built, the child enters the story under the sign of burdened labor and hoped for relief. The curse on the earth still frames ordinary life. Human beings are still bent over resistant ground. Noah arrives as a promise not yet understood. It is important here to resist a sentimental reading of the antediluvian world. Long years do not mean a simple or peaceful age. Time can deepen wisdom, but it can also deepen rebellion. A violent man with centuries to gather power is no small thing. A society with long memory can preserve truth, but it can also preserve pride. The genealogy of Seth gives the impression of continuity and piety, especially with Enoch standing within it. But Genesis does not say that every descendant of Seth remained faithful. By chapter 6, whatever moral distinction once existed in the lines of humanity has become dangerously blurred. Still, Genesis 5 does preserve one crucial idea. God has not left himself without witnesses. There are those who call on his name. There is one who walks with him. There is a child named for comfort before comfort comes. This matters because the flood will not arrive as an arbitrary display of force. It comes after patience, after generations, after warnings embedded in names, lives, and memory itself. In the world before Noah, time is long enough for corruption to ripen fully, and long enough for mercy to delay its blow. That is why the genealogy should not be skipped too quickly. It slows the listener down until centuries begin to feel heavy. It lets the age before the flood gather its density. By the time the narrative moves forward again, one senses not a sudden disaster, but a world reaching the end of a long, burdened road. Chapter 5 then comes one of the most debated passages in all of Scripture. The text is brief. Its afterlife has been immense. When human beings began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took as wives any they chose. The Lord then says that his spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Almost every phrase here has been contested. Who are the sons of God? Who are the daughters of man? What does the taking of wives signify? Who or what are the Nephilim? Why is the Lord's statement about 120 years placed here? The Bible does not pause to explain itself, and that silence has produced several ancient interpretations. In early Jewish tradition, especially in 1 Enoch and Jubilees, the sons of God were often understood as heavenly beings who crossed a boundary, took human women, and generated offspring associated with violence and corruption. This reading is helped by the fact that in other Old Testament passages, the phrase sons of God can refer to heavenly beings. It also lies behind the later language of watchers in Jewish literature, where rebellious celestial figures descend, teach forbidden arts, and bring ruin upon the earth. Another interpretation, influential in later Christian tradition, reads the sons of God as human beings from the godly line of Seth, while the daughters of man are linked to the ungodly line of Cain. On this view, the passage describes the collapse of a moral boundary through intermarriage and desire, not an angelic transgression. A third approach sees the sons of God as ancient rulers or warrior kings who claimed divine status and gathered women through power, forming violent dynasties. Each view tries to account for the language, the ancient setting, and the outcome. It is wise to say no more with certainty than the text allows. Genesis clearly presents this episode as part of the moral descent that leads to the flood. It is not neutral romance. The verb took is unsettling in context. The women are seen, desired, and seized. The action is driven by appetite and power. Boundaries are crossed, and the result is tied to a world already moving toward judgment. The Nephilim themselves are named only a few times in Scripture. The word has often been associated with giants, especially because of later passages in Numbers where fearful spies use the term in relation to people of imposing size. But the Hebrew root is uncertain enough that dogmatism is misplaced. The Genesis passage links them with ancient renown and might. It suggests figures remembered as powerful, formidable, perhaps terrifying. Whether the emphasis falls on literal stature, social domination, or mythic memory, the narrative presents them as signs that the world has become distorted. This is where later traditions became expansive. The Book of Enoch names leaders among the rebellious heavenly beings, assigns them teachings in warfare, sorcery, ornamentation, astrology, and other arts, and portrays their offspring as devouring and violent. These developments deeply shaped how many Jews in the centuries before Christ imagined the world before the flood. Echoes of this worldview appear in parts of the New Testament, where imprisoned spirits and ancient disobedience are mentioned in language that many hear against that background. Yet Genesis itself remains more disciplined. It does not catalogue forbidden technologies. It does not describe monstrous anatomy. It does not invite fascination for its own sake. It gives just enough to indicate that the human order has been invaded by disorder at a profound level. Desire is no longer bounded. Power is no longer restrained. Flesh has become the field in which rebellion multiplies. The statement that human days shall be 120 years has also been read in two major ways. Some take it as a new limit on lifespan, though later figures live longer than that. Others understand it as a countdown to the flood, a final period of patience before judgment falls. Either way, the saying introduces restraint. A line is being drawn. The world will not be allowed to continue indefinitely in its present direction. It is worth noticing that Genesis does not indulge curiosity the way later legend often does. It refuses to become a catalogue of wonders. This restraint is part of its moral seriousness. The biblical writer is not trying to satisfy every question about hybrid beings or cosmic rebellion. He is trying to show how deeply the created order has been violated. The flood, then, is not simply a response to ordinary social decay. It is the divine answer to a world in which human corruption has become entangled with forces and ambitions that exceed ordinary human measure. For ancient listeners, this passage would have carried a dreadful weight. The world before the flood was not only sinful, it was unstable at the level of boundaries. Heaven and earth, rule and appetite, strength and violence, marriage and seizure, all had become confused. When categories collapse in Genesis, judgment is never far away. Creation depends on distinctions: light from darkness, waters above from waters below, sea from land, creature according to kind, holy from common. Sin works by blurring, crossing and seizing. The story of the sons of God is terrifying precisely because it suggests that the confusion of boundaries had become one of the defining marks of the age. This is why the passage stands where it does. It bridges the long years of Genesis 5 and the grief of Genesis 6. It explains how the world could become more than merely flawed. It became swollen with force, beauty detached from reverence, and power detached from accountability. Whether one reads the sons of God as rebellious angels, tyrannical rulers, or a faithless mingling of human lines, the result is the same. Human society is no longer capable of preserving itself from the inside. Chapter 6, after the strange and brief report about the sons of God, the narrative turns and gives one of the bleakest summaries in the Bible. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Few sentences probe so deeply. The problem is not merely criminal behavior, though there is plenty of that. The problem is the imagination itself, the inner shaping place of desire, purpose, and will. Genesis then says that the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. These words must be handled with care. They do not mean that God discovered new information or was surprised in a human sense. Biblical language often speaks of God in ways that let us grasp the reality of his relation to events. What the text communicates is not divine confusion, but divine sorrow. Human violence matters to God. He is not unmoved by the deformation of his own image in the creatures he made. The violence named here is expressed by the Hebrew word hamas. It is a strong term, not limited to physical assault, though it includes that. It suggests ruthless wrongdoing, violation, cruelty, and a society in which force has become normal. The earth is filled with violence. That phrase widens responsibility beyond a few notorious offenders. Violence has become environmental. It saturates the land, relations, and institutions. A world built to bear blessing now carries blood, coercion, fear, and predation as common experience. Genesis also says that all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. The phrase all flesh can refer broadly to living creatures, and interpreters have long debated how far the corruption extends. Some later traditions imagined widespread biological violation, and some modern readers likewise speak as if the text describes genetic collapse. That may go beyond what Genesis directly states. The point the passage makes with certainty is that corruption is comprehensive. It is not locked inside private conscience. It has become embodied in the life of the world. This is where the documentary weight of the story becomes especially important. The flood is sometimes presented in popular retellings as a sudden thunderclap from an angry heaven. Genesis presents something slower and sadder. The world has been watched. Human violence has been endured. The line of patience has stretched across generations. Only then does judgment come into view. Divine grief precedes divine action. Against this darkness, one sentence appears like a narrow beam through storm cloud. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. The text does not say Noah earned rescue. It says he found grace, favor, undeserved regard. Then it describes him as righteous and blameless in his generation, and adds that Noah walked with God. These phrases deserve attention. Righteousness in the Bible is relational and moral. It concerns right order before God and neighbor. Blameless does not mean sinless perfection. It suggests integrity, wholeness, a life not divided against the covenant. Some later interpreters connected this to genealogical purity in a world corrupted by transgressive unions. That idea belongs to the history of interpretation, but the most immediate sense in Hebrew is moral integrity. Noah is not flawless. He is faithful within a ruined age. The contrast between Noah and his world should not be made sentimental. He is not portrayed as a gentle dreamer floating above history. He is a man living in an earth full of violence, bearing children, hearing divine warning, and being asked to act in a way that would define the rest of his life. His righteousness does not remove him from the world. It places him in sharper conflict with it. The Lord announces his decision. The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. The wording is severe and has been translated in slightly different ways, but the sense is unmistakable. A creation bent toward corruption will be answered by a return of waters. Many readers have noticed that the flood story resembles a kind of decreation. In Genesis 1, God separates waters and brings forth habitable space. In the flood, the boundaries collapse. Waters above and below converge. Dry land disappears. The world reverts for a time toward the deep. This decreation theme gives the flood narrative its theological depth. Judgment is not random force. It is creation undone, because creation has been morally undone. The human race, given dominion under God, has filled the earth not with justice but with violence. The answer is not annihilation for its own sake, because the story moves toward renewal. But renewal first requires an ending. There is also a public dimension to Noah's vocation. Later biblical tradition, especially in 2 Peter, remembers him as a herald of righteousness. Genesis itself does not record sermons from Noah. Yet the long process of building the ark in open view would have been testimony enough. Whether by speech, labor, or mere persistence, Noah's obedience becomes a sign set in the middle of an unheeding generation. Judgment in the Bible is rarely without witness. People are not destroyed in a moral vacuum. The ark itself stands as warning before it becomes refuge. The world of Noah, then, is a world where inner thought and outer society mirror each other in evil, where violence fills the land, where ancient mysteries hover in the background, and where one man walks with God while the age around him runs toward its end. The flood story begins in grief before it reaches catastrophe. That grief is what keeps the narrative from becoming spectacle. The waters to come are terrible precisely because they are not caprice. They are the answer of a holy creator to a world that has become unbearable to itself. Chapter 7. The command given to Noah is practical, precise, and astonishing. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shall you make in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. The dimensions follow: 300 cubits in length, 50 in breadth, 30 in height. It is not described as a ship in the ordinary sense, built for speed or navigation. It is more like a vast chest, a floating refuge, designed not to master the waters but to survive them. Much remains uncertain in the details. The exact kind of wood called gopher is unknown. The Hebrew word appears nowhere else. The cubit itself could vary, though most estimates place the vessel at roughly the size of a large ancient cargo structure, impressive by any standard. It has lower, second, and third decks. It has a roof or covering and a door in its side. The image is not elegant. It is severe, functional, and enclosed. For ancient listeners, such a structure would signal a world already under sentence. The ark is not a triumph of human engineering in the modern sense. Noah is not a naval genius celebrated for innovation. He is an obedient man building a container for life, because the world outside it is about to become uninhabitable. The genius of the ark lies in revelation, not human ambition. The command also includes the preservation of animals. 2 of every sort are to come, male and female, to keep them alive. Later, the distinction between clean and unclean animals appears. with larger numbers of clean creatures specified. This difference matters because after the flood, Noah will offer sacrifice. The categories that later shape Israel's ritual imagination are already present in seed form, even before Sinai. The world is not yet under the full Mosaic law, but sacred order is already part of how life before God is understood. Many questions arise here that the text does not stop to solve. How were the animals gathered? How much of the Earth's biodiversity is implied by kinds rather than modern species categories? Was the flood intended as global in the fullest geographic sense, or universal from the viewpoint of the human world known to the text? These debates continue, and honest readers should distinguish what Scripture states from what later systems infer. Genesis presents the event as world-destroying in scope from the standpoint of human life. The language is totalizing because the judgment is totalizing. The earth as a human place is being wiped clean. What must not be missed is the timescale of obedience. Noah does not hear the command in one moment and board the vessel the next day. The narrative compresses years into a few lines, but the labor implied is enormous. Timber must be cut, structure must be raised, pitch must be applied, space must be ordered, food must be gathered and stored. A family must remain under the burden of a task whose meaning grows darker as it advances. In a world not yet marked by an ordinary cycle of storms as later ages knew them, the project would have looked strange indeed. Some later interpreters placed great emphasis on this, imagining that Noah built in a world that had never seen rain. Genesis does say that early in creation rain had not yet fallen. Whether that means rain was wholly unknown until the flood is less certain than many assume. Still, the narrative clearly intends the coming deluge to feel without precedent. The people of Noah's day continue eating, drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, as later biblical reflection will say. Ordinary life carries on while a warning stands in wood before their eyes. The family itself deserves notice. Noah has 3 sons, Shem, Ham and Japheth. Their wives are with them. In a story where the human race is narrowed to 8 persons, the household becomes the seedbed of a future world. Salvation in the flood is not individualistic. It moves through family, through covenant extension, through ordered relations. This does not lessen personal responsibility, but it does show how the Bible imagines continuity. God saves a house, not only a solitary believer. When the command to enter finally comes, it is phrased with tenderness and authority. For I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. Bring into the ark your household, the animals appointed, and provisions for all. Noah does all that the Lord has commanded him. The repetition of his obedience is deliberate. In a book full of humans who listen and turn away, Noah listens and acts. Then comes one of the quietest and most haunting moments in the whole account. The family enters, the animals enter, the order is complete, and the Lord shuts him in. The door is not finally secured by Noah's hand alone. The same God who warns now seals. Protection and exclusion happen in one act. Inside there is life, cramped, uncertain, waiting. Outside the world remains as it was for a little longer. There is a delay of 7 days before the waters begin. Scripture does not explain the emotional atmosphere of those days, and perhaps that silence is part of the power. The ark exists. The warning has embodied itself in timber. The family is enclosed, yet the earth still lies quiet beneath the sky. It is the stillness before unmaking. In that stillness, one can feel the full moral weight of the story. The ark is not escape from reality. It is obedience within reality. Every board announces that judgment and mercy are arriving together. A door has been opened, then shut. A remnant has been preserved, not because it was mighty, but because grace found a man who would walk with God when walking with God no longer seemed normal in the world.